week. You know how it is.
Yeah.
We have wacky schedules.
Well, this is why I have a Peloton.
Yeah, there you go. And so
Cyclists give me shit about it, but I'm like, dude, yeah, it's 30 minutes right there.
No, yeah. And the thing is that, like, if I go home, then I'm doing home stuff.
Right.
Hello, Wallace and METIS Real Estate here. Thank you for tuning into this week's Zoom sessions. We love the feedback and we love all the activity and all the shares you have on our videos. It's a great pleasure for us to introduce to you some of our agents, and it's an extreme privilege to introduce some of the vendors and the people that really make our lives better. Here you are in my kitchen, and clearly I'm a big fan of coffee. This week's guest is Oscar Nuñez of High Note Coffee. He's been keeping us caffeinated throughout the whole pandemic, offering deliveries direct from roaster to client via USPS. He's an interesting character. We drink coffee, we ride bikes, and we talk about seemingly everything, especially dogs. I really enjoy Oscar, and I really loved our conversation. Hopefully you'll extract some of it that'll elevate your day as well. We did have a little bit of technical difficulty in the video. I didn't realize the camera is only set for a 30-minute period. We went just beyond 30 minutes, and I did ask Oscar, how do we get a hold of him? So I'll link his information below. You could pick up the beans and you could visit his roastery in San Carlos. Otherwise, I think his office is in Woodside. He resides right here in Menlo Park. So really a local product and a local entrepreneur getting you high quality beans and making sure everyone's taken care of in the process. So please enjoy this broad and wide ranging conversation with Oscar Nuñez. And if you feel like you need beans or you want to try something different, please give Oscar at High Note a call. Thank you so much. Hello, Wallace Chang with METIS Real Estate. I'm joined today with Oscar of High Note Coffee. Oscar is a local roaster here in Silicon Valley, and we're just going to dive into this. So, of all things, we're in an area that's known for tech and startups and software and UX and UI. What made you get into coffee?
So it started off as, so to backtrack a little bit, my previous life, I was an environmental scientist. So I used to do, I was responsible for a number of water reclamation projects for a company called Alcoa, big aluminum manufacturer.
Yeah,
and so
they make truck wheels too?
Truck wheels and all sorts of good stuff, yeah. They would send me all over the world and, just sort of oversee certain aspects of the project. Well, a lot of those areas that I worked in happened to be in coffee country. When I was in university studying, my first job was as a barista, learned how to roast, and coincidentally, the person that I worked for is basically responsible for creating the Specialty Coffee Association, or at the time the acronym was SCAA.
Was that out east in New York?
That was out east, yeah. So I went to school in Boston. I'm originally from New York City. When the office was looking to move out west, I raised my hand. I wanted to move. I've always had this thing about coming out west. So this was my opportunity. And once I got out here, I didn't want to deal with the office politics. I just wanted to do my own thing. And I sort of, just wanted to run my own business. And my partner, she would always say, like, you always talk about coffee because our family grows coffee as well. So that's where that sort of side project began. So I would try to investigate why store shelves wouldn't carry coffees primarily from Central America or, certain countries. Like, we're from Honduras. So you would never really see coffees from Honduras on store shelves. And when you started to figure out why, obviously there was a money issue. The farmers weren't getting paid what they were initially offered. So they would get cut out of a substantial portion of their deals. Number two, the quality wasn't there, so the American palate wasn't really into that type of coffee. And then the third one was there wasn't really any pride. So we needed to figure out how we can go ahead and help out with all three aspects.
And so, you kind of did that, or your father was?
No, I mean, it was a perfect storm. So there were other specialty roasters in the Bay Area that were just starting to discover or rediscover our region. But I would reach out to my family and buy the coffees directly. Now, mind you, I didn't know what I was going to do with this coffee, but
so you just bought a bunch of beans?
Yeah, I bought a bunch of beans.
Okay.
Like small containers worth, 20-foot container.
That got shipped here.
Yeah.
I mean, most people, when they get into hobby roasting, they go to Sweet Maria's and they buy like a little satchel
Right.
and then put it in a popcorn thing.
And it may have been around at the time that I started, and I started, 2012? Yeah, I'm sure they were around, but I didn't know about them. I
Right.
just did my own thing. And
So a container of beans show up. What's
Yeah.
next?
So now I'm like, oh, I should probably try to sell to some roasters. Well, no, some roasters were starting to discover the whole direct sourcing or
Mhm.
working with different exporters and purchasing beans that way. So I quickly realized that I need to change my business model and start roasting for myself, which I did. And initially, I partnered with some people at Canyon Coffee, and they allowed me to use their roaster. They were first a little apprehensive because they didn't think I had any experience, but I did. I roasted on that particular machine back east. So it was just a matter of like riding a bike, just kind of
Mhm.
relearning the steps. And so I would start roasting coffees and hooking up with the farmers market scene here in the Bay Area and just trying to peddle my wares.
Because we do an image search on Google for high note coffee. It's you at the farmer's market.
Yeah. So that's how I started. And
Mhm.
it turns out that a lot of the bigger names like the Blue Bottles of the world, and I'm not really sure about Ritual and Four Barrel and all those guys, but Blue Bottle is the first name that comes to mind. And they were the ones that were going out to farmers markets and selling their coffees and really trying to get people to understand the complexities and the nuanced flavors of a particular coffee and roasting it in a specific way.
Right.
And so we were kind of doing our own thing, but primarily with coffees from Central America because I really wanted to help out that community. So that was
So it's
really
primarily Honduras.
yeah.
What would you? So
Not
would you-
anymore. I
Mhm.
mean, we do branch out. I do
Right.
work with a lot of importers that do all the heavy backbreaking stuff. And so all I have to do is just talk to them and say, hey, I'm really interested in this flavor profile. What do you got? And they'll send me a list and we'll pick and choose the coffees. Now, the real important thing is that they follow the same ethos that I did when I first started, which is they purchase the coffees directly from the farmers. So they're basically one step away from me dealing with the farmer.
You got to make sure at the heart of it, you want to make sure the farmers
Is getting
get paid.
Yeah. I mean, that was the whole point of starting the business, was to make sure that my family was going to be taken care of one way or the other. And it shouldn't be any different with any other farmer in any other region. But we wanted to make sure that the companies that we partnered with were also following that same protocol, that same ethos.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a big part of
Sure.
being in business is making sure everyone is taken care of.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that nowadays any roaster purchasing their coffees are basically following the same thing. They're allowed to go and see what these exporters are paying for the coffees. All the certifications are attached with it. So now I think at this point it's really the secret sauce is really in how you roast your coffee and
Mhm.
maybe to some extent the particular region within a country.
So let's get into that.
Sure.
What would you call like the flavor profile of your coffees? I mean, is it the classic like dark French roast or?
Yeah, so I rarely go down that path. I do have a dark roast blend,
Mhm.
but it's nowhere near like Pete's and the Starbucks. We realize that the beans are too good to go ahead and roast.
So before we get that, these
Sure.
are Arabica beans.
Yeah, so there's basically two. I mean, the varietals extend quite. It's a quite large spectrum. But for argument's sakes, you have two main varietals. It's the Arabica and the Robusta. And the Robusta is more of the lower grade coffee. It's got a little more punch to it. It doesn't have.
It's kind of your red eye gravy special.
Yeah, that's if you want some oomph in your coffee.
Right.
Yeah, that's where you go with. But nowadays they're growing really high
Right.
quality Robusta coffee. So people are starting to get a little hip to it. But Arabica is really where it's at. Those are more of the higher elevation, the more nuanced flavors. You have them pretty much grown in all the coffee regions. So that's what we generally work with.
And you've been keeping me caffeinated all quarantine.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
And they're delicious, and I just like popping them in because it's the same grind.
Sure.
And the fruit profiles and just it's a really elegant cup.
Yeah,
is kind of how I explain it.
Sure.
How would you explain the coffee that you make?
So again, our wheelhouse is generally Central American coffees, and those flavor profiles are basically the same. You know, there's going to be some medium acidity to it, which some people are a little more susceptible to the acid in the coffee, but it definitely gives it a nice complex flavor. But it's generally your chocolate notes with a little bit of fruit note to it. It's not quite as fruity or citrusy as, let's say, an Eastern African coffee, but it's not as robust as, let's say, Southeast Asian coffee. It's got a little bit of that going on throughout, but mostly like the caramels and the chocolates are really the predominant flavor profile.
They're pretty even keeled. Have a coffee, you'll like it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Right.
Like, it's easier for our palate, you know, whether we do it light, medium, or dark, it seems to work for the majority of the people.
Kind of a crowd pleaser.
Sure, yeah.
Groovy. Let's go a little back. Explain to me the meaning of high note.
Yeah, so high note was like...
and you got like a clef too.
Yeah. So my fiance helped me come up with the name, and it was more like start your day, end your day on a high note, but everyone in our family plays a musical instrument. I haven't really played in a long time, so don't put me on the spot with that. But I started with viola and then skipped the cello and went straight to like double bass.
Just give me the big guy.
Yeah, just give me the big boy. Through elementary school, middle school, and high school. And then, of course, you know, we all discover pop music, rock music, and we want to be in a band, and no one else was playing bass, and I just kind of stuck with it. And so, yeah, that's my tattoo. And then the logo, the original logo, has the coffee cup with the G clef as the stem, and then the handle of the cup is the bass clef. So everything is musical about it. We have a blend that's called Trumpet Solo Blend because my daughter was playing jazz trumpet for many years. So that was an homage to her. And every now and again, we'll come up with a different blend. And those special blends have special labels. So right now, the most current one is called the Disco Dogger. I didn't bring you any of that.
You're holding out on me, Oscar. You're holding out on me.
I'll bring you that in the next one. And so the theme behind that, it's more of just a joke. It's my dog. She's going to be drawn in different scenarios, and it's always going to be some musical theme. So in this particular one, the Disco Dogger one is her dressed up as John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. And so the coffee also is going to represent that kind of like that freedom, that I just want to dance crazy. And it's going to be a pretty wild coffee. So they're generally coffees from Cameroon, Burundi, Zambia, like stuff that you really don't get to drink. But when you do drink them, they have just the craziest notes. And
kind of wants to make you move and dance.
Yeah, just want to move around. Yeah, well, they'll definitely move you around.
That's a great way to start off a day.
Yeah, so I think the next one we're going to do is maybe my dog as dressed up as like Beethoven or Mozart or something like that. And so more classical, might be more of a darker roast, that kind of thing. Brooding and heavy and stuff like that. So
you're going to go into the Baroque era, or you're going to go into the...
We might do something like she'll dress up as Elton John or something, and you know, we'll do something like fanciful. And
I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you're having a lot of fun doing high note.
You might as well.
Right.
Might as well. The cool thing is the interactions that we have with people, right? It's just like your business. It's all about the one-on-one, and you feed off of, you know,
it's really just, I think you got to love people, right? And your product kind of speaks to them and elevates them and helps them, you know, be part of their life.
Well, what I think is really interesting is that coffee evokes an emotion, whether it be positive or negative, right? But nevertheless, it evokes an emotion. And some people are really adamant about a particular profile. You can't stop them. You can't change them. And I'm fine with that. Some people absolutely love the dark roast coffee. So my job is to really try to re-educate them, or maybe educate them on, you know, hey, try this. This is our version of a dark roast, or this is our version of this particular coffee. Why don't you give it a try? Like, that's all we ever ask for. And if you like it, awesome. And if you don't, I get it. It's cool. But, you know, just to be able to like vibe off of that person's, you know, aura and their wants and desires, like we'll try to manipulate the coffee.
When's the last time you've been to Japan?
I've never been to Japan.
Have you ever heard of a coffee house called Ono Tosando?
No.
So when you walk in, it's this little coffee shop. I think it's in Ginza.
Okay.
But you walk in and there's this line, it's crazy line out the door. It's probably maybe 200 square feet, tiny charred wood shack in the middle of like Ginza. It's incredible. And you walk in and they don't ask, what do you like or how do you like your coffee? They have a whole spectrum between like light to dark, and it's a whole experience. They sit down there with you and go, what do you like and what notes do you like? And from that, they have this matrix and you end up somewhere on it.
Sure.
And that is the coffee they're going to brew for you. So they go back into like this medicine cabinet.
Nice.
And they pull it out, measured and everything. It's crazy. Depending on the bean, it's through a siphon, it's through a pour over, or it's through an AeroPress.
Yeah.
And Oscar, here is your coffee. And it wasn't until that experience I realized I like third wave, fruitier and lighter coffees.
Sure.
Where you could taste things. And I learned my wife and I never liked the same coffee because she likes the red ice special.
Okay.
She likes darker French roast. So that's why if you come to my house, I always have two coffees now. I have high note in the grinder for me, and then we just have French roast for Crystal.
I'll have to go ahead and give you guys, because I do a French roast every now and again. And I definitely do a dark roast. And so I'll have to give you guys one of each to try and see what she thinks.
We'll push her palate just a little bit more.
Just a little bit. Like we'll get her away from far right, far left, whichever way you want to look at it, and just sort of bring her a little more central. One of the things that was hard for me to do was just take it to a roast level that was a little too uncomfortable for me. The quality of the beans were too good to let it go past a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
And, what's the point? What we started to realize that was sometimes roasters do that because of the quality of the beans are not there. So they're just masking the defects. And, sometimes it's just easier to roast a really dark roast. As far as the consistency is concerned, burnt is burnt no matter which way you slice it.
Right.
And so that's easy to do. It's harder to do a proper lighter roast and a really good medium roast.
And your quality is not consistent and
it's
pushing up.
Tough.
Yeah.
But the other thing too, to geek out on it a little bit, even the same coffees from the same region, season to season, they do change. It's just like any other fruit and vegetable. There are certain aspects of it that change. Maybe it's a matter of the humidity, water content, the way they processed it and fermented it. All of those things do carry into the final product. And then, of course, the machines that we roast on and stuff like that. And so this particular machine that I'm roasting on, it's pretty high tech, so it works really well in Silicon Valley.
So you do have integrated tech.
Yeah. It was basically a startup company based in Berkeley, and they just came up with some real disruptive technology. Everything is contained in, so there's very minimal heat loss. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a hyperbaric chamber, so there's really no oxygen entering in when you're roasting the coffee. So when it comes out, it's pure. The other really cool thing, it's controlled by an iPad, so the consistency is there. And my favorite part, it's run by electricity. So there's no gas lines. You don't have to worry about venting. Everything is scrubbed internally.
We just talked about coffee roasting during the Loma Prieta and all the gas lines had to be shut down.
Yeah, exactly. See, we don't have to worry about that. The only thing that's going to happen is we might lose internet and electricity, and then I have just a big giant piece of metal. And the really cool thing is that it's probably the size of a double door refrigerator.
That's awesome. So you kind of have a high-tech coffee for high note.
Right. For high note. Yeah, it makes sense. And it's a pretty cool machine. People look at it and it becomes like the central art piece, because it is. It's beautiful form functioning art. It's kind of the way Apple presents their products. Clean, very sophisticated.
That is cool. Super rad. Right? I got to look that up.
Yeah.
So for the first timer, someone enjoying high note, what's your recommended brewing method?
So I'm a big fan of Chemex. I can't, you come to my shop and that's basically what I'm going to brew coffee in is in a Chemex. You can't go wrong.
With a Chemex filter or?
Yeah, with a Chemex filter. Yeah. Unbleached and just No, there's nothing fancy about it.
Good to know. We have a Chemex. I will
Yeah.
do that with your beans.
Yeah.
But then we also have a siphon here.
Yeah, which I'm
and,
really excited to use.
What's the
I keep
difference?
breaking them.
What would you say is the biggest difference between like a siphon brewed cup versus like a Chemex or other pour over?
So I feel like the siphon's probably going to be a fuller bodied cup. It's been a little while since full disclosure, it's been a while since I've brewed in a siphon. But the last number of times that I've drank in from a siphon, the coffees have always had really like a slightly heavier body to it. It could have been the coffees that I was drinking, but generally in the siphon, it's always been a light and a medium roast. But for some reason, for me, it's always come out a little heavier. Whereas the Chemex, it's a cleaner, brighter cup. Even if I use the darker roast, for some reason, it just seems like it's a cleaner cup. It's a good way to find out if there's anything going on with my coffee. So I just stick with that method.
Any imperfections will just kind of peak and you'll taste it.
I have one of those Able filters, those reusable metal filters. And so I do that from time to time when I want something with a bit more punch. But for the most part, I'm always using the Chemex paper filters. But this I'm excited to go ahead and play with. Yeah, because 3 times the charm. Hopefully I don't break the third one. And they get expensive.
Well, yeah, they, when you want one, they're like gone and sold out.
Yeah, I know.
So.
That's always the case, right?
Right.
Like you can never, when you want it, you never have it. They're always out. But Harry always makes some good stuff, and they really know their coffee. So, I have a bunch of the pour over.
I keep breaking those too.
Oh, really? I have a 4 Harry station, and I have the Melitas just in case they break.
Are we talking about your kitchen or your warehouse?
This is actually in my garage.
Oh my gosh.
My garage, I have an espresso bar. Yeah, it's awesome.
Good to know.
Yeah.
You answered a lot of my questions.
Sure.
I'm just going to give you free time to talk about anything you want on the camera, and also how does one get your coffee and how does one get a hold of you?
Yeah. So.
And what do you primarily do? Because you don't really sell directly to the public.
I don't run a cafe, if that's what you mean. So the best way to get to us.
A lot of your beans goes to like cafes and coffee roasters.
No, coincidentally, we're working on it. We have 0 cafes, and we have maybe 1 big office account, but obviously with everything that's going on and all the offices are shut down, that's not happening. But with everyone sheltering in place, or not so much anymore, but still working from home, people order online. So that's been a huge increase for us. It's been a big thing for us.
It's been a pivot.
Absolutely. Well, the real pivot is roasting for other people. So we have, unfortunately, because of what's going on right now, we've had a lot of cafes that have shut down, but still want to roast their own brand. So we'll roast for them. And some people that are looking to get into the business without investing too much capital in the equipment, they'll come to me as well with ideas on the coffees that they want to roast and profiles, and we'll go through the whole consultation. And
it's awesome. So you're like a coffee magician.